Thank you
And
so much for joining in, Shama. Appreciate that.
no worries. Who do we have around here? Jitan, Aryan, Sashi. Nice. We've got a few people. Amazing.
Yeah. Your name says it all, and it just invites people to come by. Your energy is great as well. So,
Thank you very, very much. Thank you so much.
since we've had this connection over not only your 21 days, but before that as well, there's such a beautiful connect that I see with you,
Thank
especially
you
because
very
of the
much.
values you carry. That just so resonates with me.
Thank you very, very much. It was a beautiful journey, the 21
It,
days, so it was quite remarkable.
yes. And there's so much more to dig in, dwell in deeper within ourselves every single day. So
Yeah,
I've again started your
yeah.
21-day journey on my own, along with reading your book. And it has been a beautiful journey so far.
Thank you.
Of course, the first
It was
21 days.
good. You were, yeah, you were quite a core pillar in the first group of 250 people who took the journey. You lots of gratitude for how you showed up with sincerity, with authenticity, the courage to share difficult things. You gave a lot of people strength at a time when they needed an avenue to just share. So I'm eternally grateful for how present you were throughout the whole journey. It meant a lot to me.
Thank you. This means a lot to me as well.
You know. And how have you been? What's been happening in the lockdown? Tell me, how's the lockdown been treating you?
Lockdown's great. In fact, I mean, I wouldn't say great, but yes, I'm pretty much good in a good space, I would say. I'm currently in Gujarat at my naturopathy center, so shuffling between my naturopathy center and my resort. And we're just by the beach, and because there are not many guests around, so we're pretty much in a safe zone as well.
Yeah,
And we practically have the whole resort to ourselves, the naturopathy treatments to ourselves. So yes, it's a good cleansing process internally, externally, and it's a good feeling overall.
amazing. That's good.
How was
That's
your
very, very
trip?
good. I mean, it was good. I spent the last couple of days in Bellary, which is
Mm-hmm.
just outside Bangalore at the Inspire Institute of Sport. Uh, I went to shoot some content and interview some of our Olympic athletes. One was Sakshi Malik, we know, who won the bronze medal wrestling. The other was Vikas Krishnan, who was a boxer, and the third was Rajrang Punya. Okay, so I spent a bit of time with them, interacted with the staff there. It was quite beautiful. It was a little scary, to be honest, to be traveling at a time like this. Everywhere's in lockdown. You want to be careful because the state of health in the country is not great. So we have to be mindful of whatever's happening around. And so I was conscious of that. On one hand, I was eternally grateful that I could travel and see a different part of the world. I was grateful that I had the opportunity to interact with some of our Olympic athletes and look at their preparation amidst all the turmoil that's happening. And then on the other hand, there was a lot of fear about what's actually happening and how do we address it and how can we be present for everyone. And that's a battle I'm constantly facing all the time.
Right. I'm sure everybody, must be facing a similar battle. Of course, the depth would differ from each one, and how
Yeah,
one deals with it will differ, but I'm sure everybody is sailing in the same boat.
yeah, absolutely.
And it
Absolutely.
is scary. It is scary. So during the first lockdown, also we were here in Kutch, and we spent 9 months here. And
Oh,
the villages, and we are amidst, villages around. So it's not like a flourished city by itself, or so we're just amidst small villages, and we didn't even see a single case around in our small villages. But this second wave, apparently every single village is affected. So it has
Yeah.
reached to the like to the level of the villages around. And with low
Yeah.
infrastructure, it becomes slightly scary, because if we were in Mumbai and something would have happened, God forbid, you would still have amenities and certain things, supplies to deal with our condition. Here it's a little more tricky. So
Yeah. Exactly.
the safer we are, the better we are. I mean, that's all we can say, and that
Yeah.
works for everybody, I guess. The safer they are, they're in a better
Ah,
space.
absolutely, totally. No doubt about that. And
Yeah.
I wonder how everyone is doing. Why don't you let us know? Skyos, why don't you let us know? I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. You're good. How are you guys doing?
So Shamas Chaos is my son who is studying music in Boston, and I'm
Ah,
surprised to
amazing.
see.
Very, very
I
nice. So how are things in Boston? And maybe you can let us know. I'm sure things are a lot better in the US for sure.
I doubt that though.
Uh,
I really doubt that things are better in Boston.
he's doing good, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah. As long as individually we all are doing okay, I think we are in a good space.
Nice, nice. So what are we talking about today?
So let's start now. I think we are what, like 7 minutes. Should we start, Shamal? So
Yeah,
let me
yeah, yeah.
start with your introduction, because I would really love to give you that. I mean, of course, you really need no introduction. But as we all know, he's a sports scientist, a high performance coach, a psychologist, an EQ consultant, an author, a motivational and a TEDx speaker, an ultra runner, and much more beyond these labels that can name him. He also has 2 decades of on field experience with professional athletes in tennis, on track, and field, and has coached plenty of Olympians and World Cup cricket teams. He himself, Shaval, you yourself are a sportsman, a monk, an entrepreneur. And we both come from a similar set of belief system of giving back to the society. And that's how I beautifully connect with you. So today, Shaval, I want to peel a few layers of how we can create balance in our mental and physical well-being. uh, we are already aware that health is not only the absence of disease but also the well-being in plenty of dimensions, including physical, mental, social, and spiritual. Now all
Correct.
these dimensions are also beautifully interconnected with each other, and hence they play a very important role in bringing a balance in our lives. So your book, Breathe, Believe, and Balance, beautifully helps us understand the concept of balance, and it has actually changed my complete understanding of what balance is. So Shamal, can you delve a little deeper on what do you mean by maintaining balance, and how do you maintain balance in all these 4 dimensions as well?
So, when I talk about balance, I bring in four verticals, and I can take this one question and answer it in so many multifaceted ways. But the reason that I was interested in balance was because I've never lived a life of balance ever, which is what I say. So I was interested in peeling away the layers of what's required. And there were a few myths around balance. The first myth is that it needs to be symmetrical. Okay, so that's a myth. If you look at balance in every occurring ecosystem on the planet, very asymmetrical. The second myth is that balance is static, like a weighing scale. Balance is not static. Balance is fluid and dynamic more than anything else. And the third thing that we have to understand in balance is that the integrity of the central point is probably the most important thing. So the central point upon which anything is balancing in is vitally, vitally important. And by integrity, I mean its strength. And in your life, you are the fulcrum or the central point upon which balance rests. But more important than that, Raksha, what we fundamentally need to ask is why is balance actually important? That's the question. Not how do we achieve balance. The first question is why is balance actually important? And that was where I started. And when I wrote the book, it's right in the last chapter. I talk of the ego and how the ego is impacted on the extremities of life. I tell people that, when you have everything on the planet, every single thing under the sun, okay, your ego is very impacted because you have a sense of entitlement with how you should show up, how you should be treated, the type of food you should eat, the level of travel. All of these things are massaged by the ego, and you create barriers to you discovering yourself and barriers to the world discovering who you are. On the other extremity of life, when a person has absolutely nothing, okay, then the ego is impacted as badly, because they wake up every single moment of the day trying to understand, how can we fit in, how do we stand out, how do we get acknowledged, how do we get appreciated. And what is that need for acknowledgement and appreciation is the ego as well. But the balance, the middle point of something that's represented by balance, is really and truly the point in one's journey where there is no ego. You're not the worst, you're not the best, you're not the richest, you're not the poorest, you're not the smartest, you're not the dumbest, you're not the most beautiful, you're not the worst looking. There's nothing. You're right, and there's really nothing to brag about. When there's nothing to brag about, the ego is down. And when the ego is minuscule, you give yourself the best opportunity to discover who you are. Now, that central point of balance is described in almost every single religion. You look at Chinese philosophy talks of yin yang. And the yin yang is the balance of the black and the white. It's the presence of the black that allows the white to be seen. It's the presence of the white that allows the black to be seen. And they take that balance philosophy into healing as well. So every single element of natural herb that comes out of China has a heat and a cold component to it. So they diagnose disease with respect to the temperature that disease has, and they treat it with the opposite. So if you have a hot disease, they'll give you a cold medication. If you have a cold disease, they'll give you a hot medication. So balance is important there. But there was something really interesting that I discovered recently, which is super important, because most of us grow up in India. We, in some shape and form, have Vedic spirituality deep in who we are. And I discovered something super important, which also highlights the importance of the midpoint. And people will be fascinated by this. The Mahabharata is a scripture that has 100,000 verses. Okay? And the Mahabharata is broken up into sections, and each section is called a parva. The most important parva in the 100,000 verses is smack bang in the middle of those 100,000 verses, the most important section. Now, if you take out that most important section, smack bang in the middle of that parva, which is called the Bhishma parva, is the Bhagavad Gita. Right in the middle. The Bhagavad Gita is broken up of 18 chapters, and smack bang in the middle of 18 chapters, verse number 350 and 351 is what the author Ved Vyas describes as the most important verses in all 100,000. Now, it's not coincidental that such learned people who were inspired by a universal energy that we cannot understand put the essence of life right in the middle. It's not a coincidence, So, and that's the thing that I'm on that journey of asking myself, what is it? The ego pushes us to the side, but the heart actually desires the middle, So, and what's really fascinating is what was written in Breathe, Believe, Balance. Who I was when I wrote that book, I don't even recognize that person, because I've evolved in my understanding of balance and the ability to surrender to balance much, much more. So, I hope that helps.
Wonderful, Shamal. And I know that, you've written this book before the pandemic, and of course it published while the pandemic was on. And I'm sure you must have evolved, because evolution or self-discovery or self-actualization, it's an ongoing process, and there's never an end until you're alive. So now I know what makes you so humble and grounded, because you are not really, operating from your egoic state. And I do remember reading a book, I Am Okay, You Are Okay. I think it's on transactional analysis. And it also talks
Okay.
about three egoic states, which is the parent, which is the adult, and which is the child. So I think where we need to bring in balance is being in that adult stage, not even a parent who's commanding, not even a child who's throwing tantrums. So
Yeah.
wonderful, Kamal. You've beautifully addressed balance and why is it so important, and hence we need to we need to kind of put an effort to make this an ongoing process beautiful as well, because it's not the end journey that we should be enjoying, but also the process. And that's one of the beautiful things that I learned in your 21-day program. That it's all about enjoying the process, also getting where you are. So thank you, Shamal, for this wonderful balanced story and helping us understand that. Now, since we all know, Shamal, that we constantly need balance in all in all the above dimensions, and we need to prioritize as we go through each stage of our lives, and it's an ongoing process. Now, I want to just break down these dimensions a little more in depth while we go through our conversation. So I truly believe that we are not only what we eat, but also what we digest. And I think
Yeah.
here is where gut health kind of, brings its importance in defining who we are. So not only do the right foods or the food choices and a balanced meal affect our gut health, but it also affects the health of our brain. Now, can
Yeah.
you, Shamal, throw some more light on understanding our health and its connection with its physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being?
Yeah, it's a very simple philosophy. It's basically what we're saying. You're not a byproduct of what you eat. You're a byproduct of what you digest. And fundamentally, what that means is that your body is filled with trillions of bacteria. And those bacteria are what oxidize and metabolize food that release nutrients into your bloodstream that really impact your nutritional and hormone balance and your cellular function and metabolic function throughout the body. Okay. So what we're trying to say by saying you're a byproduct of what you eat is we're trying to highlight that understanding the internal physiology and how it's functioning is supremely important. And it's not a case of because a vegetable or a nutrient is good for you, it's equally applicable to everyone. There's a principle called the principle of individuality, which speaks about the fact that no two humans would respond in the same manner to an external stress, which could be a nutrient, a food, an exercise, or anything like that. So what we encouraging people to do is, if you're truly invested in the journey of growth, is to be invested in understanding yourself well enough to know what are the steps you need to take to move in the right direction. So for example, if you want to understand your gut health, there are tests that will test your gut microbiome and let you know what are the active cultures, which will then allow you to understand what foods you should eat. Interestingly, it took me some time to realize that the presence or absence of gut bacteria is completely different from your body's tolerance or certain nutrients. So that's a completely different set of data points. But once you start becoming interested in this, you start layering it upon. And fundamentally, the reason I use this theory in the optimization of human physiology is because if the body is wasting energy to cleanse, it can't use that energy to optimize. You understand? So the idea is to feed the body as much stuff that it likes and that it needs so that it can be used for healing as opposed to detox. Because every time you put something in your body that doesn't belong there, it has to work 10 times harder to get it out of there. And as a fundamental rule, I spent almost 2 decades working with athletes and using supplements and stuff. Now I work using the 5 elements. I use earth, fire, air, space, and water. Only the natural elements. And I have a fundamental principle. I said, if you cannot pronounce an ingredient, do not eat that ingredient. It's very simple. You cannot pronounce it. Plants don't come with a letter and a number attached to it. There's no plant that is E364. There's no plant that has a chemical name. So if you can't pronounce something, don't eat it. And I'm trying to absorb that ethos into every single thing that I bring in. And it's working quite beautifully because why? Your brain and your body, and Raksha, this is the fundamental thing that people don't understand, is that, you see, when someone markets to you a supplement that is made inorganically, right, using an organic structure, right, that the body doesn't recognize that supplement in the same way it would recognize the naturally occurring substance, you know.
Yes,
So,
I
and as a result of that, it doesn't process it in the same manner, which is why it's very important to eat things you can pronounce.
right. So I completely agree with you because I come from a naturopathy background, and we have a naturopathy center here in Gujarat too, and we grow our own organic foods, which we which we eat and which we call in Mumbai also when we are in Mumbai or while we are here, we just eat that, and we also have our own cows, and we want to make sure that we ethically breed them. I mean, and get
Yeah.
whatever little milk that we need on a daily basis. But so we make sure that we work with the 5 elements of earth, and that's how we've seen amazing results at our naturopathy center. So we've had people come in a wheelchair and go back home walking. So I understand the power of what nature holds for us, and it's all about tapping that right energy from nature and healing ourselves. So yes, thank you so much, Yamal. Shamal, also,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was just about to dig in a little more about these prebiotics and probiotics. And we also kind of, have an understanding how prebiotics are a food for the probiotics, and hence we need the fibers to, make sure that our probiotics survive in our gut. But can you just bring in some light on the probiotics that are available on the shelf, because they can be so misguiding, and which ones are good and which ones should we go for, something on that.
So, I mean, the basic gut bacterial structures that are available are like your lactobacillus, your acidophilus, and then numerous others, your bacteriums, your casein bacteria. All of these are the commonly occurring ones that you would take. The fundamental problem with shelf-based probiotics is, and especially in India more than anywhere else, is that the bacteria are dead. So probiotics and prebiotics need to be live cultures. So people need to understand that the culture can only work if it's alive. If the culture is dead, it cannot heal your gut and work in any shape and form. So the one way to test if your probiotic works, and I do this quite regularly, is you just take milk and you open a probiotic and you drop it into that the powder into the milk, and you leave it overnight. And if that culture was alive, that milk should curdle overnight. If the culture is dead, the milk wouldn't curdle, it wouldn't be sour. So that's the first and probably easiest way to do it. The other interesting thing is when you buy a probiotic, have a look at the date of manufacturing and try to buy a probiotic that was manufactured in winter. Because the colder temperatures preserve those cultures better than the hot temperatures in the subcontinent, for example. So these are just a few rules that we do, because a probiotic cannot work if and there's something called butyrate, which is also very important for probiotics. And butyrate is found in like butter, for example. Low quantities are found in ghee and certain types of coconut oil presence are there. Butyrate's phenomenally health, and there's a direct correlation between your gut bacterial strains and your brain health. So your ability to function and the balance of the 4 driving chemicals in the brain, which acetylcholine, serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. And so and gut bacteria, the number one driver for happiness, the happy hormone, is called serotonin, and 90% of serotonin is in your gut. So whichever way you look at it, there's a very, very strong correlation between gut health, what you're eating, the food you're eating, how you're perceiving situations, how you're reacting in communication, in conversations. All of these things, there's a very, very strong parallel between it. And I just hope people start becoming more mindful of this.
True. And what you said really makes sense, that if the culture is not live, you're not really drinking or eating anything which brings adds to your probiotic. So even if you have the best expensive probiotic drink, if it doesn't have a live culture, it's pointless. So coming to that same thing, could you tell me at what temperature do these probiotics in a drink survive? Or, if you heat that drink, will they survive? Or if there's too much of salt and sugar added, would these probiotics survive?
So, I mean, sugar, most things that are fermented have a little bit of sugar that actually kickstarts the fermentation process. But remember, sugar in itself is something that doesn't react too well with your gut. Processed sugars, they create a lot of damage in the gut. They can leach through your bloodstream. They can create those spikes in blood sugar. So, but having said that, like I said, most people would use a sugary starch to start the entire fermentation process. Good, healthy probiotics are generally eaten or packaged cold. When you heat something, then you stand the risk of denaturing that probiotic in some shape and form. So we generally don't encourage this. It's like your curd. You see what happens to curd when it gets hot. It becomes watery. It doesn't hold its shape anymore. That's exactly what's going to happen with those probiotics. They're going to get denatured in some shape and form. And this applies to all fermentation. Room temperature and cold would suffice. Anything that's heated stands very slim chance of that bacteria stands a slim chance of survival.
Right. So what you're saying is only basically cold and room temperature helps the live culture grow and survive.
Yes.
So now, what about the sourdoughs? This currently having sourdough breads has been a craze, and now that requires baking well and heating at a particular temperature for it to rise and everything. Of course, it has fermentation process. So how do you? What do you have to say about that?
So sourdough is not really prescribed because of its probiotic types of cultures in it. Sourdough is a fermented bread, and the reason it's prescribed is because through the process of fermentation, the gluten content in the bread is reduced significantly. So one wouldn't eat sourdough bread to get any probiotic from it. You're eating it because what you want to do is you want to consume a form of bread that is suppressed in gluten content. And that's fundamentally the reason you do it. Your probiotics would come in the form of fermented foods, your kimchi, your kombuchas, your days, your yogurts. You can ferment certain vegetables, things like that. That's what actually comes through, and that's where you're getting those gut bacterial cultures. Having said this, it's also something really important. And remember, like coffee, if there are people who drink coffees, coffees that are grown in different areas have different bacterial strains in them as well. So it's important to consume a variety of different vegetables, a variety of different fermented pickles from different areas, different plants that are pickled, different types of coffee. The more variety you bring into your food, the healthier your gut will be. Okay, right. And as a rule of thumb, what could be really interesting is if you're someone who travels a lot, in the days before you travel, okay, start trying to consume foods that you would normally get there, okay, or in the new country, or before you travel, for about 48 hours before, start cleansing the system, start fasting so that you eliminate the bacteria, eliminate the toxins from that system. And when you go there, the first thing you eat there is start consuming whole-based, plant-based products and live cultures there. So you kickstart the process of reculturing bacteria in accordance with the food that you're going to eat wherever you're traveling. So this is it's a very nuanced science, but it's something that we do with our athletes, because otherwise you run the risk of having an irritable bowel syndrome every time you travel. And working with professional athletes, we can't do that. Every time there's a gut health problem, we run the risk of losing days, if not weeks, away from training.
Right. What you're saying really makes sense, Shyamal, because we, especially for people who are on the go, cannot afford losing days, and we cannot be sitting with a bad digestive system either. So it's nice to first cleanse yourself before you travel, and then consume foods that are locally available. Of course, diversity is still the key to maintaining your gut health. So I do
Absolutely.
recommend my patients that today, if you've had vegetable from one vendor, maybe you want to try another vendor because it comes from a different field, and every field will have a different diversity of bacteria which comes along in their foods. And I remember my grandparents, Shamal, they would work in the fields and they would just pick, wash, and eat. So they would still get the natural bacteria from the, without washing them, like how we wash them now. So there's so much
Yeah.
diversity of in just that small, washing technique.
I mean,
And the,
growing up as a child, I mean, I remember even eating mud and eating clay and playing with it and stuff like that. I mean, that would be unheard of now. If you tell a child who's 10 years old now to eat mud, they'll think you've gone crazy, isn't it? So what happens is the immune system was strengthened very naturally, 10, 20, 30 years ago, through the interaction with the natural ecosystem, through grounding our energy by walking barefoot on plants. Your body became resistant to certain bacterial strains that were present on the ground. You hugged trees, you climbed trees, you ate mud, you ate fruit as you just picked it up. Your body became highly resistant to bacterial strains and viruses through the natural process of play, which is not there right now. And that's one of the problems of living in a really hypoallergenic environment or cleanly environment, isn't it? Where we super clean everything, is that the body is not getting a chance to develop resistance against even simple strains.
true, I completely agree. So now, talking about these microbes, we all know that these, microbes that are present in our gut health, they all have a specific function to perform. Like I remember, I read about a research paper which had this, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it said Akkermansia muciniphila. And that particular microbe not only balances our glucose levels, but it helps us manage weight. And there are certain other researchers which, tell us about inulin, which is a prebiotic, which helps the bifidobacteria and the lactobacilli to grow. So it's all about a combination of, a pre and a probiotic, which helps us deal with our gut issues also. So do you have any food recommendations that we can, eat together to maintain our pre and probiotic, which are on the same levels or the same lines?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. It's a difficult question for the simple reason that your gut microbiomes sit upon what's called your human genome, right? So everyone has a genetic code, and it's the presence of a certain gene that allows a microbe to actually function. The presence of the gene allows a microbe to be expressed in form. So if somebody is really deeply interested in this science, you have to pair these two pieces of research together. You have to understand what is your gut microcultures and what is your genetic play and how do they superimpose upon each other. So for example, your genetic coding will tell you, you are predisposed for high risk cardiac disease. You have a certain gene SNP, singular nucleotide peptide, that predisposes you to high cardiac risk. And that's an interesting piece of research. Now, that means absolutely nothing because that gene needs an environment to be expressed. Okay. Now, the expression potential of the environment is directly correlated to what's called epigenetics. So how you live your life and the food that you eat. So it's those two things that give that single nucleotide peptide the ability to really express. Yes. So what happens is if you want to prevent that from expressing, right, then you need to sort of eat foods where the microbes are present that when broken down do not target that gene and allow that gene to be expressed in some shape and form. So this is how they really and truly sit upon each other. It's very difficult for someone to come and tell you, hey, eat this food here and you get this benefit. And I know a lot of dietitians and a lot of nutritionists say that, and they take, kale has amazing benefits, or moringa has many amazing benefits. Do this, and yes, a lot of people feel some benefit from it. But there are tons of people, for example, who I know take moringa and haldi every single day, and it doesn't change their life at all, and they're feeling zero change from it, and that's because we don't understand the expressionable potential of that nutrient through their microbes on their genes, which is how to do it. And I mean, that's the pitfall of being a scientist, isn't I ask these questions here, and I generally fall into my own rabbit hole, and and that's the problem.
No, but you beautifully explained why it's important to not only know your genome, your gene structure, and your epigenome, just to find the right combination of what will work for you and what will not work for you. So coming to that coming on the same lines, are genetic disorders healed with your gut just by healing your gut? Because we've seen a lot of digestive issues get healed by your by getting your gut health in place, but we've also beautifully understood the brain gut connection, the gut skin connection, the gut thyroid connection. So is there a possibility of healing?
Yeah. So Raksha, there are all sorts of things. The first thing someone who's listening needs to understand is that any illness has two components to it. It has a chronic component and an acute component. Acute component is when it happens all of a sudden, an injury, an accident, an infection, or something like that. And those you can take some precautionary measures, but it happens, there's very little you can do. It's the chronic ones that really are things that we're interested in, because chronic is impacted due to your lifestyle in some shape and form. And Vedic sciences interestingly says that most chronic diseases enter the body through one of two ways. They enter through your mouth or through your brain. So through your mouth means the food that you eat, and through your brain means the quality of the thoughts or whatever you're thinking on. And through this process, we look at what's called the psychic root cause of disease. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this to you is because we started the question talking about if someone was ill. Well, if someone was ill, what we need to understand is that we have different types of bodies. You have a physical body, which is what you can see. And just outside of that, you have a mental body, and then you have an aura body, and you have a spiritual body. And if a disease manifests on that physical body, it's already transmuted through all of the other bodies. You understand? Which means you're impacted and infected at all levels. And healing really and truly needs to reverse the ailment at every single body level. So when you see cancer patients, for example, go into remission continuously, and even though they've gone through chemo and surgeries and stuff, it's because we've addressed the problem at the physical body, but we've not addressed the problem at the mental body, at the aura body, at the spiritual body. We've not switched off the program that is the root cause of the manifestation of that growth or cellular growth. So I think what we should leave people with is the awareness that any illness, right, needs to be tackled from multiple different ways. You can eat healthy, you can move, those are all physical. You can see a therapist, and you can start working on your mental state to switch off that programs. Then you can raise your vibrational energy through spiritual practices, which raises your astral energy and raises your spiritual energy. And only when you get to that level can you truly say, I've healed from it. We cannot heal a chronic ailment only at one level of the body.
Right. And you beautifully, explain the whole connection of your physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being, because they all are interconnected and they all need to work simultaneously to bring in good health.
Yeah.
So, Shayama, coming to another question is, how often do we need to cleanse our gut, and how do you do that?
So, your gut cleanses itself if you eat enough fiber. That's the role of fiber. The role of fiber is to cleanse the gut. And that's why processed foods are not great, because we've really, like if you eat a maida, there's no fiber in it whatsoever. If you drink a fruit juice, you're taking in all the sugar, you're not removing the fiber. A fruit, incidentally, the maximum benefit of eating a whole plant fruit is actually the fiber content and not the antioxidant and glucose content. You can get antioxidants and glucose from many other things. It's the fiber content that we actually need in food. So the body's got a very natural way of cleansing itself, and that is through the consumption of fiber. So eating more, you're eating your leafy vegetables, you're eating your fruits, you're eating whole-based plants. That fiber will cleanse the gut. Another way to really detoxify the body is through fasting, and fasting is probably one of the best forms of elimination and detoxification. Okay, and the reason you want to do this is, and one of the acid tests of knowing you have a healthy gut is when your bowel movements are regulated within the certain hour in the day on a day-to-day basis. Then you know that your body's entire digestive system and bowel movement system is in sync. And if you go to any nutritionist or dietitian or doctor, and if you're struggling to pass stool, or if you're having a urinary tract infection, the first thing they're trying to get into you is they're trying to get fiber to cleanse the gut to go in there. Fiber, incidentally, also, the presence of fiber also creates butyrate in the gut, which is a fantastic prebiotic as well, which you get from butters as well. But the presence of fiber also does that as well. And when I'm saying fiber, people misconstrue fiber, as someone's rightfully saying here, from wheat. If you want to truly live healthy, you got to stop consuming processed foods. But second thing is the grains that have been cultivated through industrialization and capitalism. And what are those grains? Those grains are corn, they're wheat, and that's rice, white rice. These are the three grains that were cultivated or developed through industrialization for mass market production. Okay. We need to go back to eating indigenous forms of fiber, right? So India, for example, has more than 50 different types of millets that exist in the country, which you've completely been disconnected with. So getting back into the process of connecting to these millet-based grains will bring our body back in sync with it. And I see the world moving to a beautiful space where we live in micro communities. So, when you look at Okinawa and you look at Costa Rica, or you look at Ikara in Greece, and you look at all these blue zones, they're so healthy because the guy really knows where his food came from. Today, you ate a meal. You have absolutely no idea where your food's come from. You wish it came from around the corner. It's probably one thing's probably come from this corner of the world. The other one's, the truck has gone to China and then come here from Argentina. We have no idea. So we're going to move into a space where if you understand where your food's coming from and you understand who's making it, it does one of two things. One is the trust in the process is better. You trust the source. The second is it connects us on an empathetic level because we know who the farmer is. We know his name. We know who he is. We see how hard it's working. We're a little more mindful of wastage. We're more mindful of consumerism in some shape and form. So these microcosms that we'll need to build for the sustainability of civilization will come down to our awareness of how we consume food.
I agree with you, Shyamal, completely, because I've seen my grandparents who lived in the villages, how beautifully they had no wastage. They mindfully used water, every drop of water and every grain, grain of food available. And they were following the circadian rhythm and just mindful about everybody around them as well, not only the environment and animals around, but just about the entire space was so beautifully managed by them. So I completely agree that we once did live in such a world, but just because of industrialization, we're going down the drains. And I think we're following the Western culture, which is equally not healthy, not only food-wise, but environment-wise and empathetic-wise, and just about everything. I think we Indians used to really follow so many things in depth and detail, taking a lot of care about our environment and plants and the smallest living being possible on this planet. So Shyamal, nowadays many of us face deficiencies of vitamin B and D3. We've of course known that leaving mushrooms outside in the sun can enhance their vitamin D content. I've kind of used the D Minder app also, which kind of gives me an average about how much vitamin D am I consuming through the sun directly. Do you have any small hacks which can help us enhance our vitamin D and B12 naturally?
So, really vitamin D is the easiest vitamin to absorb. And, the reason why it's the easiest is because all you need to do is literally just spend 30 minutes in the sun, But the eradication of that process has it's been once again fueled by so much. It's been fueled by these fair and lovely campaigns and all of these things. So what we've done is we're not getting it. And you can take the supplements out there, but none that's going to make any difference, because your body struggles to process these. And you'll find that people who spend a lot of time in the sun, their immunity is phenomenally high, and so it's very, very important. You can absorb vitamin D by sun gazing. Given these beautiful abilities through our body, yet we just completely disconnected from them. So, I wouldn't even recommend getting into the habit of leaving your vegetables outside and then cooking it. I wouldn't recommend taking a vitamin D supplement. I would say, if you look at the supplementation industry, what do they say? They say these should supplement natural eating, right? They say if you're not getting any of the normal things through food, then take a supplement. Okay. So the same thing with vitamin D. If you live in a country where you cannot get efficient sun exposure, right, or the sun is not warming up, then we look at it there, right? If you are bedridden and you can't go out, then look at it. But if you're fully able to go out into the sun, it's healing, it's therapeutic, it's grounding of your energy, and it's the most natural way to absorb the most powerful vitamin that there is out there. So I would try to tell people, the more conscious we are of not taking a shortcut, the more quicker we will find our own healing formula.
Right. So unless it's absolutely necessary to take a supplement for whatever reason that your body can't process or you can't go out in the sun, you should ideally take it naturally from the sun. And sun not only will give you the right amount of the vitamin, but will also energize you in different levels that's even unimaginable.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So Shamal, coming back to our gut connection and our mental health connection, during these crucial times, plenty of us are going through different amounts of stress. So can you throw some light on how stress affects our gut health and how we can manage our stress levels by bringing certain routine practices or including certain foods in our diet that will help?
Sorry, I lost the signal. What was the question? Sorry.
So because we're going through a crucial, stressful time, could you emphasize or throw some light on how gut health gets affected directly with stress, and how can we manage our stress levels either by bringing in some simple routines or by including certain foods?
So the biggest thing with stress is the increase of a hormone called cortisol in the body. Once cortisol comes into the body, once you start getting anxious, your digestion is the first thing that's impacted. Digestion predominantly just shuts down. So if you are stressed and you're eating, your body is really and truly not metabolizing any of that food. It's just storing all of that food. Okay, so that's fundamentally the first problem. So if you want to get your gut health in order and you want to get your digestion in order, then the first thing we need to do is really calm down. You need to get the stress hormone of cortisol and norepinephrine out of the body, because that's the only chance you have of bringing your body's natural rhythm back into order. Yes, you can work in accordance with circadian rhythm, work at a certain time, but even aligning your body's waking and sleeping with circadian rhythm is going to make absolutely no difference, okay, if you're highly stressed and anxious all the time. And one of the fastest ways to get rid of stress is really with your breath. I keep talking of long, slow exhalations through the mouth. will stimulate what is called a parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve. Okay. Once you stimulate those two systems, the body will completely relax and it'll flush out all of these stress hormones. Only when those hormones are, then you're giving your body a fighting chance of actually metabolizing the food that you're eating. So most people are putting on weight or getting sick for two reasons. One is that their body is not metabolizing any of the food that they're eating. So it's called emotional weight that they're putting on. Right? The second is that the bioavailability of the nutrients that you're eating is not there. Right? Because the cortisol is preventing it from being actually metabolized and being absorbed in the weight. Because cortisol is what? Let's just understand what cortisol is. Cortisol is a flight and fight hormone. When was it secreted? It was secreted when somebody's getting ready to fight or someone's getting ready to run and store. So what it's trying to do is it's trying to store energy, isn't it? Because it senses that we may need this at a later stage. Now, imagine if your body's always in that state of alarm or alertness where every morsel you put in your body now gets stored. That's why we put on weight. The body is naturally not inclined to be overweight. Human beings and human-fed animals are the only overweight animals on the planet. Literally, you won't find another overweight animal that's not human fed. Even if you find an elephant that's overweight, there's a good chance he's been fed by a human. Because natural eating occurs with an intuitive feeling of when you're hungry. Okay, and you eat naturally and it metabolizes. So we've created a catastrophic problem because we're putting food into our body that the body doesn't even recognize, and we are layering upon stress, which means that it doesn't recognize it. So you're asking your body, listen, hey, I'm going to give you food you don't recognize, and then I'm going to secrete a hormone that's going to make it incredibly difficult for my digestive system to work. And now with these two things here, I want you to try to absorb whatever nutrients you can. That's the rudimentary, harshness of the situation that we're in.
So what you recommend is, when you're stressed, just calm down, just relax.
Just calm down,
and
breathe, yeah.
Only when you're ready to eat, go and eat. When you've calmed down completely, no matter what, just don't eat, don't stress eat, or don't binge eat, or don't completely stop eating stressed either.
Yeah. Vedic science says don't eat when you're angry. It prohibits eating when you're angry. And it should prohibit eating when you're stressed as well. It says don't eat because the consciousness of the food you're eating is changed.
Right. And hence never make food also while you're angry, because that also
we've heard that, isn't it? We've heard that for the longest time. Our grandparents and great grandparents always used to say that. They used to always worry about the type of consciousness that was in that food. And they lived until ripe old ages, isn't it? 80 plus, healthy, moving, brain working, everything. These diseases didn't exist there. So they weren't having fancy CrossFit gyms and running marathons and doing all of these things. But the consciousness connection between them, what they ate, their community, and the earth was very, 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 very in tune.
Right. I completely agree, because I've seen my grandparents do that. So I completely believe in what we are saying as well, because it's first-hand seen.
Yes.
So coming to the last question now, because I think we're running out of time as well. How do we stay motivated during these crucial crises that we are facing currently? My reason to ask you that is because you've trained so many athletes and professionals, and I'm sure they must have gone through some ups and downs either before their performances or while they're, about to perform. How have you kind of motivated them to stay on path?
Yeah, it's interesting. I keep telling people, if you take an unfavorable situation, when you accept an unfavorable situation, it manifests as tolerance. When you do not accept an unfavorable situation, it will manifest as anger. So that's tolerance and anger. When you accept uncertainty in your life, it manifests as adventure. When you do not accept uncertainty in your life, it manifests as fear. Okay. Now, what's the tipping point between these two? Between adventure and fear, or between tolerance and anger? The tipping point is directly proportional to the people you speak to when you're in a situation. Okay. So we've heard this so many times. We've heard you're a byproduct of the 5 people you spend your time with. You're a direct byproduct of that. We've heard this in every single book. We've read this 1,000 times. That single piece of information, if you only listen to one thing from this entire talk, that single piece of information is probably the most gospel thing we need to imbibe into our life right now. So your ability to perceive a situation from a completely different perspective, your ability to be tolerant to a situation that's beyond your control, your ability to see what would manifest as fear in others as an adventure in your life is directly proportional to the people who are advising you at this time. Directly. So if there's one thing you want to be mindful of, before you even be mindful of the food you put in your system, be mindful of the people you speak to. Be mindful of the people you listen to, because those are the people that are directly impacting your neurobiology way more than any food you eat.
Wow, this was so beautiful and so intriguing, because this is where we build, where we connect not only our physical health, mental health, spiritual, social, just about everything, because it's a holistic approach of looking at
Absolutely.
yourself and how it brings out who you are. So beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Shamal, for bringing in this beautiful connection and, kind of spiritually enlightening us as well through this entire conversation that we had. Thank you for staying with us for
Welcome.
this. I mean, we've exceeded our time. Thank you for staying for this long. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you for being so humble and, taking on my request. Once again, thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you so much. And to everyone who's watching, thank you for attending. And maybe you could tell them and they could join our soul group, our community of people, and we can all heal and grow together.
Yes, your 21-day journey was an amazing journey, Shamal, and I completely blindly vouch for this. So anybody, whoever wants to join in Shamal's 21-day Grow with Soul, you have to do it. I mean, this is like one-time opportunity that you're going to get with Shamal, and it's such a beautiful, giveaway prize. I think, and the beauty, I think, of your 21-day program is you can do it at your own time. There is no fixed time that you need to dedicate. Do it at your own time and do it at your own pace, and you still have all of this available for a lifetime.
Yes.
And of course, your 3 conversations, live conversations with you and Sid are beautiful as well. They help you grow so much with the community you help us build. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Yes. Bye-bye. Thank you.